Hey, it's good to see everybody there at Nebraska Zen Center, and welcome to everyone who is zooming in online. Today's talk is about meaningful work. There's probably I think we have a lot of wisdom in our Sangha itself around this subject. So, what I'd like to offer is a koan story. We'll look at the Blue Cliff Record, case 42, to give us some orienting to this subject. I'll offer some remarks about it, my own personal perspective, also coming from the Dharmic perspective. And then I'd like to invite some discussion from you guys. And I want to hear from you what about this. And I have specific discussion questions maybe that can help to further guide us in this exploration of meaningful work. I'm creating 8 or 9 points for optimizing Zazen, and this one is point 5, meaningful work, just to contextualize this particular talk. And as we start, before we get into the Blue Cliff Record, what I'd like to mention is the connection, a direct connection between meaningful work and Zazen specifically. It occurs to me that when we do Zazen, and just in my own experience of Zazen, there is this tendency in myself, and I suspect in many of us, to direct our attention inwards. And there's all kinds of precedents for that within the Buddhist tradition and within the secular mindfulness movement as well. But I want to suggest that that is an incomplete understanding of Zazen, that we're not simply turning our attention inward and focusing on the self. And the key point for Zazen is that for us, for Soto Zen, I can't speak for other Buddhist traditions or meditation traditions, but for Soto Zen, it's really important, if we want to align ourselves with the world around us, to keep our eyes open, That's the instructions for Zazen right from the start. And Dogen Zenji says, always keep your eyes open. This might seem like a small point, but I think it has huge ramifications for our practice outside of Zazen. By keeping our eyes open, of course, with a soft focus, we're not intensely focusing on what we're seeing, but we're keeping a soft focus so that we're taking in the breath of our vision, including our peripheral vision. And what I've found in my own meditation practice, when I do that, I feel a greater connection with the external world, But, when we're sitting, I think this is kind of a challenge for our practice, though, because when we're sitting facing a wall, you might really cut off that external world. And that may not serve us so well when it comes to meaningful work. Because with meaningful work, what we're thinking about here is, how do we connect our meditation practice, our Zen practice, beyond our cushion? Right? How do we align the values of Zazen, mainly keeping the precepts, with the world around us? How do we connect with meaningful work in this time? And I really think this is not an easy question for any of us to answer. In fact, I think it's a koan. In fact, I think it's what we refer to in Zen as the Genjo koan. The Genjo koan, Dogen's Genjo koan, is, what is my life about right here, right now, in the Dharma? Right? What is my life about right here, right now? And it's the question that I want to propose that we hold closely. The answer will come probably from a lot of different directions, but I think we got to hold on to that, the question of what is my life about? This is directly connected to meaningful work. And coming back to this idea of opening the eyes, keeping the eyes open, within the Genjo koan itself, Dogen Zenji says, to study the way is to study the self. And a lot of us confuse that self with the small self. But actually, it's the big self. To study the way is to study the big self, which is this whole universe. To study the self, the big universe, is to forget the self, the small self. So he's saying the same thing, just in a different way. To forget the self is to be one with the myriad things. That's another way to say the same thing. To be one with the myriad things is to realize no barrier between self and other. Okay? So again, here's the question, this bridge between Zazen, meditation practice that we do maybe once a day, maybe twice a day, maybe we do a weekend retreat. How do we bridge that with our life? And I want to suggest right from the start that the question is important to raise. Wherever we are with that, the question is really important to raise for us. Like, how do we carry out the values that we nurture in Zazen into the rest of our life, particularly in our working life? So, on that, I'd like to share case 42 of the Blue Cliff record. It's these koan cases in the Blue Cliff record and the Gateless Gate. There's so many different dimensions to them. There's so many different aspects to them, and I'm going to just highlight one piece here that I think for this particular question of meaningful work is central. So first of all, case 42, for those, I'm guessing most of us don't know it, and I wouldn't know it either unless I've been reading it. It's about a layman. It's about a Chinese layman named Pang. So this is somebody who is engaged in the world. And so again, I want to emphasize the fact that Soto Zen is not about removing ourselves from the world, but engaging with the world. Otherwise, why would there be a layman in this koan? Right? How do we, again, the question is, how do we engage with our actual work that makes it meaningful and aligned with our ethics, with our values? So this is about Layman Pang, and he says, it's apparently Layman Pang was studying at a Zen temple with the Zen teacher Yakusan. Right? Yakusan, he's one of the teachers that we chant his name in the morning ceremony. And as he was preparing to leave, he had been staying with Yakusan for some time. Who knows how long? Maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe a year. I don't know. But keep in mind, Layman Pang had a family. He had a wife and 2 children. So somehow he managed to integrate practice at the temple with practice with his family. So as he was getting ready to leave, as he was preparing to leave the temple, his teacher Yakusan had 10 Zen students see him to the gate. So here's what happens when he gets to the gate. It's snowing out. Might feel right now with this heat. I don't know if you guys can feel this heat, but it's quite hot here in Iowa. I'm sure in Nebraska as well. And I know we've had some power outages there in Omaha recently, so grateful for the AC. But this is a story that took place in winter. It's snowing outside, and he's getting ready to leave. The layman pointed to the snow in the air. He pointed to the snow in the air. So this is a turning to the external world. He's pointing to the snow in the air. And he says, "Find snowflakes, they don't fall elsewhere." This is if we really take this particular statement that he makes and really meditate on it, really concentrate on it, I think it will lead us to a sense of deep sense of meaning and purpose in our own life. He says, find snowflakes. They don't fall elsewhere. In other words, they're exactly where they need to be. At that time, a Zen student named Zen, his name was Zen, and he asks, where do they fall? So this is a question that comes from that particular monk's great ignorance. And we know because in the next line, Layman Pang rebukes the monk. He says, he rebukes the monk, and he says, the likes of you call yourself a Zen student? The king of death hasn't let you off. He says, your eyes see as if blind, your mouth speaks as if dumb. All right, so let's keep this, this, again, we want to make the context for this with meaningful work. And imagine here all these snowflakes coming around, and you know how snowflakes move, right? They're going, it seems to be chaotic. The snowflakes seem to be coming down in all different directions, bumping into each other, and then they land. And the Layman Pang is saying, they're all exactly where they're supposed to be. They're all. So here's one thing I want to point out is that looking at this from the outside in, when we're looking at the world from the outside in, it looks totally chaotic. But Layman Pang, he had been honing his concentration. He's not looking at the snowflakes as other. He's not looking at them as something out there. He's looking at himself as one of those snowflakes coming down, right? And in a sense, each one of us is like one of those snowflakes. And we try, as human beings, we try to pull ourselves out and objectify what we see out there as if we don't have a place in it. And the world appears chaotic from that perspective. But if you get inside the snowflake, right? If you get inside the world and you're 100% inside of your life, then you're exactly where you need to be, right? The snowflakes are not falling randomly. And in the same way, our life is not a random, chaotic expression. It's not something that our life isn't put together by chance. This is an important piece here. Our life isn't about chance. It's not random. In other words, there's a sense of meaning. There's a sense of purpose to our own lives. But from the outside, it appears, or it may appear chaotic. And when we're not concentrated, when our attention is diffuse or scattered, it might seem we're just drifting in the wind. But we got to get inside the snowflake. So what I'd like to do is consider some questions around the idea of meaningful work. I mean, this is just kind of a real overview, and I don't have the answers for you and for your life. What does meaningful work mean? But I'd like to give us now a chance to explore what that might mean. So I have a series of about 4 discussion questions, and I'll just read them off. And you can consider them, and maybe we can take them one at a time, or if there's one that speaks to you, you want to bring it up, then do that. And even if there's something else about this, what I've just shared, or that comes up for you that's more pressing, I really encourage you to bring that up for us. Okay. So discussion question 1. How do you align your personal values with your professional life? Right? How do you align your personal values with your professional life? And connected to this, can you share an experience where your work felt deeply aligned with your inner values? Can you share an experience of that? Okay, that's one. That's one. Number two, and I'll repeat these if I'll repeat these. What obstacles have you encountered seeking meaningful work? How have you addressed them? How do you cope with periods when your work feels purposeless? Okay. So this is has to do with the obstacles to meaningful work. Number three, in what ways can small everyday actions in your work contribute to a greater sense of purpose? All right, so honing in on the concrete. In what ways can small everyday actions in your work contribute to a deeper sense of meaning and purpose? And the last one, how can our Sangha support each other in finding meaningful work or sustaining work? All right, so those are the questions. And let me start out with number one, and again, just maybe we can just do these one at a time. How do you align your personal values with your professional life? And can you share an experience where your work felt deeply aligned with your inner values?
Well, I don't know. I guess I don't necessarily, naturally, I don't necessarily believe that work, meaningful work is sequestered to a professional life. There's all kinds of work, unpaid work, there's parenting, there's, and I don't know. And I have to say that I'm, for those of you who know me, I'm finishing up my degree, my master's in social work, and that obviously has an element of purpose and meaning, but I was also a stay-at-home mom for a long time, like a stay-at-home parent. And I guess that, I don't know, for me, it was really useful coming out of that now that my kids are school age and, when your kids are babies and toddlers, it was really useful for me to realize and just go through my day-to-day, the understanding that meaningful work and purposeful work isn't always rainbows and sunshine. Sometimes it kind of sucks. Sometimes it's a bummer. Sometimes it's a drag. And so sometimes it's all of it. Sometimes it's joy and these highs and lows. And but if there is meaning, you can tell when you're doing meaningful, purposeful work because it's this engine that sustains you. Through the oh my gosh, this sucks, but you still do it. You put your foot in front of the other because it's important to you and you have a felt sense of that in your life, whether or not it's paid work or unpaid work. But I think it's useful to kind of get clear about whatever it is that, and it could even be art. You may hate your job and okay, but then you come home and then you have this thing that you're really passionate about and and you do it, and that's meaningful work because you're giving something of yourself and maybe other people are benefiting from it somehow. And yeah, so I don't know, I guess for me, maybe just getting really clear of whatever that engine is, and even though it's not always a really good feeling experience, it's still worth doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Thanks for that, Sarah.
Hi. This is Vicky. So for me, this is a question I've spent a lot of time on, and I talked to Nonan about it many times, and he would be really clear with me. You can't say 501c3 good, corporation bad. So it's not like they're, like Sarah was saying, like there's just one profession and that's the good one and everything else is you're evil. And it's easy to, get into demonizing certain professions and asking, what is your role? But not only the role of the corporation, because I've worked at some companies that have been really good as far as wanting to help the community and be involved in the community and encourage their employees to be involved in the community. And I've worked at some other ones that are like, get me the hell out of here. And so I think the corporate culture or the business culture is important to look at, as well as your role within that culture. What am I doing? I was blessed to be able to talk to people all over the world, and I'm learning. I'm speaking to people in the Philippines and people in China and people in all through Europe, and seeing. Making global connections. And also I've had a compliance type role, which is usually an ethical base for the business, and that is how I've kind of worked with these concepts, as well as Sarah said, like volunteering and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah, well, these are all examples of you guys finding some success in meaningful work. And certainly, yeah, I agree. It's not limited to one particular job that has to be meaningful. It could be a corporation, it could, depending on the culture. How about this next question, about the obstacles? What obstacles have you encountered seeking meaningful work? And how have you addressed them? How do you cope with periods when your work feels purposeless? Yeah.
This is Brian. I'm curious if this is kind of a journey, and that it feels like maybe I always like to say luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so at one point in time in my career, I designed websites that sell whoopee cushions and pink flamingos. And it was great. It paid the bills and everything, but there wasn't a lot of, it didn't feel there was a great purpose behind it. And then I had the opportunity to design sites that were accessible to people that were blind or were paralyzed or had a cognitive disability. And that is something that feels very rewarding.
Mm.
But the journey started first with, like, I need to basically make income to take care of my family. But then the opportunity allowed me to transition into something that feels bigger than just that. And so I'm curious if this snowflake is on this journey as it's taking its path.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. I think that describes where a lot of people are. I mean, you have to be able to make ends meet, and you may not be doing something that is meaningful for the wider whole, but it's enough to, help with your family needs and pay the bills. And that's where a lot of us are. But you're also pointing to the potential for a journey to something that is more meaningful, like you mentioned, designing websites for the blind, and how that felt a lot more fulfilling. So, yeah, I think we're probably all of us are on a continuum here of, and see, here's the thing. This is where we might see ourselves, especially if we're in the place of making money to pay the bills versus doing meaningful work. If we find ourselves over here, we might see the world as somewhat chaotic, in a chaotic space. But then moving in the direction of a sense of fulfillment, the universe moves the whole world into a sense of order from a place that seems or appears like chaos. So I wonder if there's other folks that might have something similar to share to what Brian said.
I've got something.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking almost like the inversion of that, and what comes to mind is the line in the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, which is, "You are not it, in truth it is you." I was really obsessed with my work having meaning, so I decided I should be an organic farmer. And the idea behind that was like, why not live on my values and do this thing that's great for the perfect world and like, yeah. And in the meantime, you know, I ended up working 90 hours a week and I was a bad friend and daughter and like just had no space for anything besides this endeavor that I thought was so meaningful. And it made me a little crazy and stressed actually. And so that was an obstacle. And the solution to that was to retire from farming. And now what I do isn't something that I like idealize as like this great thing that I can lend myself to, but the meaning tends to be more in the fact that I can show up with presence because my life is balanced and I can be a better version of myself and trying to bring my practice to the thing that I do, whatever it is, has helped a ton.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Maureen. That is a really helpful other counter example where you can get into trouble doing something you're totally passionate about, and then it's off balance with the rest of our life. So you give a good example of you have to be careful there too. Like, do I live a meaningful life, but at what expense? Yeah, and certainly what you've learned there, you can apply now going forward. And who knows where that will lead you to, and what other opportunities might be ahead for you. You've got some really good experience there. You know what you did that probably didn't work out well. And you know you probably won't do that certain things again, but you've learned so much in that process of seeking that meaningful work, aligning with your values. But then again, like, where do where's the balance there?
Yeah, it sounds like it's not to.
It's not to, right? Yeah. All right, well, here's another one. In what ways can small everyday actions in your work contribute to a greater sense of purpose? In what ways can small everyday actions in your work contribute to a greater sense of purpose? Right? Because Zen really focuses on the small things.
That's my theory about my job. I work a lot of corporate jobs, and the current one I have is not very meaningful outside of its purpose for what that company does and how they make money. Doesn't really, in my opinion, it's not very glamorous. So the way I find my meaning there is in creating an equitable space for people around me, showing up, not being a bad boss, which is a shockingly low bar to clear sometimes. And that's really what drives me. That's what motivates me, and then also my own skills and increasing my own abilities and getting better at what I'm doing. And that's more fulfilling than when I had maybe a more meaningful job in this job where I was just absolutely bored out of my mind and really couldn't connect my own values to what I was doing. So that's how I see that in those small ways. Sometimes it is pretty difficult to achieve those small tasks, but I measure it in the people around me and their ability to get their job done and not have to deal with bad corporate culture because it affects everyone.
Yeah. I just think that's another great example of the snowflake analogy where, we're kind of bouncing back and forth between seeing the chaos and removing ourselves from it, but then also entering into it and seeing that, wait a minute, my job actually carries some weight and importance, and what I do, it matters. And you really see this this kind of attitude in Japanese culture. People take their jobs so seriously, so much to heart. People take their people take their job so much to heart. And I mean, not just people that are doing service-oriented things, but even the ones that are working at the counter at McDonald's, the ones that are working at the 7-Eleven, the ones that are working at the airport, the taxi driver. They do their work 100%. So I've seen so many examples of that when I was in Japan. And I remember a story Oyama Roshi, one of my teachers told of getting into a taxi cab, and the taxi driver struck up a conversation with Oyama Roshi and basically intimated to her that, you know, I don't feel like my job is so meaningful. It's definitely not like a Zen priest. Like a Zen priest, they have really like this meaningful job. And Oyama Roshi's response to him was, "Oh, don't, you know, actually your job is so important that if you don't do it, it's like if you look at the makings of a watch, and if one screw is not in that Rolodex watch, the whole thing doesn't work. And each of us is like one screw in the hole. It's so important that we do our particular job, whatever it might be, and to see ourselves as totally playing that important role, or imbuing that sense of meaning and purpose in whatever it is that we're doing. That if we don't do it, the universe falls apart, right? That's kind of the Zen take on it. If we don't do our job, the universe just unravels. All right, I went on. Anybody else want to share?
I got one. Oh,
Yeah.
not this job particularly, but I think people know that I worked in a factory for about 19 years. Started on the floor, I just walked in one day, got a job, and kind of moved up and around, did a million different jobs, but I never really liked it. The actual work part of it. The meaning that I found in that particular, well, all the different positions that I did while I was there, really came down to interacting with coworkers. You know, people have a lot of drama in their life, and some people don't have a lot of other people they can talk to about it. So I kind of became the type of person that anyone could talk to anything about with. So kind of get that reputation. So you hear stories from people that you'd be shocked or surprised. They just telling this guy that worked at the building with them, but I guess I was kind of doing priest training while I was at my old job already, kind of. So I had my practice already, during that whole time. It kind of, the Buddhist part of the Zen part of my practice began in the same year as that job, so they really overlapped for a long time. So, yeah, really just being there for people is what really got me through it. Wake up in the morning and be like, I just don't want to go in. I don't want to go in. I don't want to do it today. I could call in, but then I remember that basically all my friends were there. All the people I knew were at that job. If you've been at a job for that long, it just becomes your entire life. So trying not to project that feeling of just being, oh, I don't want to be here all the time. People knew that I didn't want to be here, but they also knew that I liked to be with them as well. So there's this weird dance, like the yin and the yang, the dance of the karma that manifested as that job in my life together. But yeah, really just being there for other people is incredibly meaningful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that particular boat, Shinkyu, where they don't find a sense of meaning or purpose in their particular job, but they create, and that's what human beings do. We're meaning-making beings, and you find the meaning. You find the meaning even in what's seemingly meaningless. And in your case, through being there for your friends that were also there, being a supportive presence for them. Yeah, wonderful. So just my prayer is that we all, use our Zen practice, focus, our concentration, get inside of your own job and do it 100%. I know you can do it. Keep it up. Keep up your good practice. And we're all rooting for you. The whole universe is rooting for you. You know, your life is meaningful beyond your comprehension. So go keep at it, keep up your practice, keep up your Zazen, and keep sharing the love with each other in the Sangha. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's close out.